Lighting my phone screen was glowing in the dark, lighting up my bedroom like a small emergency. 63 missed messages from my family, all stacked on top of each other, all saying some version of, "Please talk to us. Please pick up." A few weeks earlier, I would have answered in a heartbeat. Back then, I still believed my mom when she said she would move in for a week to help me after my hip surgery, that she would cook, clean, and make sure I did not fall, trying to get to the bathroom on crutches. My name is Nora Hayes. I am 31 and I live alone in a third-floor walk-up in Portland. I went into surgery thinking at least I would not have to go through recovery alone. Instead, 2 days after I came home, I found out my mom had packed her ski jacket and left town. When I called my sister, I could hear music and laughter in the background, the wind rushing past an open car window. She did not even lower her voice when she said, "Don't guilt-trip me. We are here to relax, not to serve you." I stared at my pill bottles on the top shelf, at the empty fridge, at my swollen leg, and something in me just snapped. So I smiled through my teeth and told her, "Thanks for showing me who you really are." She laughed like I was being dramatic and hung up. That was the last normal conversation my family ever had with me, because a couple of weeks later, I made a decision they never saw coming. And if you have ever been the reliable one in your family, you might want to hear exactly how I finally stopped saving them. The morning of my surgery felt almost calm, like everyone had finally agreed to take me seriously for once, and I remember thinking maybe I had been too harsh when I told my sister thanks for showing me who you really are. My mom drove me to the hospital, fussing over my bag, my paperwork, my phone charger, telling every nurse who walked by that she was staying with me and that she would be moving into my apartment for at least a week after I was discharged. My dad, Mark, showed up with coffee, kissed my forehead, and said we would all get through this together. My sister, whose name is Tessa, swept in late with her husband, Evan, holding a to-go latte, and her phone up for a quick selfie. Something like visiting my brave little sis before hip surgery, and then she was gone before they even rolled me into the operating room. When I woke up, groggy and dizzy and feeling like my hip had been replaced with a brick, my mom was sitting in the chair next to my bed, scrolling through her phone and telling me not to worry, that she had everything under control at home. She told me she had already made a shared Google Calendar for my meds, my physical therapy exercises, and even my meals, and she kept repeating that she would be staying in my place so I would not have to do this alone. I clung to that promise when they discharged me the next day, when every bump in the road on the way back to my third-floor apartment made my teeth clench. My building does not have an elevator, so just getting up those stairs once with crutches and fresh stitches was a full workout. My mom helped me into bed, stocked the nightstand with water, snacks, and my phone, put a couple of containers of soup in the fridge, and told me she was going home just to grab some clothes and check on the coffee shop she owns with a friend. She kissed my forehead and said she would be back early the next morning. I believed her, because that is what you do with your mom, even when you should know better. The first night at home was rough but manageable. I had pain meds, I had TV, I had the flimsy comfort of hearing her voice in my head saying she was coming back. The second day, my hip felt like it was on fire. I needed my next dose of painkillers, but the bottle I had to switch to was on the top shelf in the kitchen, just out of reach if I stayed safe with my crutches. I called my mom and it went straight to voicemail. I texted her and saw the little delivered sign, but no typing bubble. I messaged the family group chat that she had made for my recovery, the one called Nora Recovery Squad, and it stayed completely silent. I tried to tell myself she was driving or busy with a customer, that she would walk in any minute with groceries and a guilty smile. When the pain got worse, I tried to be independent and called in a food order on an app, thinking I could manage to shuffle to the door. The driver did what they always do in my building, left the bag in the hallway and took a picture. But by the time I had gritted my teeth, braced my crutches, and inched my way out of bed, My leg gave out halfway to the door and I had to crouch there, sweating, trying not to cry. The food sat outside until it went cold. I made it back to the couch somehow, found an old granola bar, and tried to laugh at myself for being so helpless. By the evening of that second day, my phone was still dry of any call from my mom. No message from my dad either. It was only when boredom and anxiety pushed me to open Instagram that the truth hit me like a fresh wave of pain. There on my screen was Tessa in a brand new ski jacket, standing in front of a snowy slope with her arm around my mom, my dad, and her husband Evan behind them, all of them grinning at the camera. The caption said something like much-needed family getaway to Mount Hood, and the story clips were full of them singing in the car, clinking travel mugs, talking about how they had earned this break after a stressful season. No one looked stressed. No one looked worried. No one even mentioned the daughter they had left on the third floor with fresh stitches and an empty fridge. In that moment, staring at their perfect little family ski trip, the last of my excuses for them disappeared, and the hurt started to harden into something colder that would shape everything I did next. I stared at that picture so long my eyes started to burn. Then I did the only thing that made sense in that moment. I hit call on my sister's name. It rang way too many times before she picked up, and the second she did, I could hear music, laughter, somebody talking about the fresh powder like they were in a ski commercial. She did not even say hello, just a quick, "Hang on, guys, it's my sister." And then she put the phone to her ear. I said her name once, trying to keep my voice steady, and told her I was out of real food, that I could not reach my next bottle of meds on the top shelf, that Mom had not come back like she promised. There was a pause, and then she let out this long, annoyed sigh, like I had just interrupted her manicure. "Nora," she said, "you cannot do this right now. We are finally out of town. We needed this." I told her I was not asking for a vacation. I was asking for someone to help me not fall on my face trying to get to the bathroom. She laughed, not a nice laugh, more like a little scoff, and said, "Don't guilt trip me. We're here to relax, not to serve you." The word serve hit harder than it should have. I could hear my mom in the background asking who it was, and my sister muffled the phone to say, "It's just Nora. She's freaking out again." I went quiet for a second, staring at the empty living room, the pill bottle glinting on that stupid high shelf, the cold soup container in the trash. Then I felt something in me click into place. I smiled even though she could not see it and said, "Thanks for showing me who you really are." She made this little sound, half irritated, half amused, and said I was being dramatic, that I always turned everything into a crisis. And before I could answer, she said, "You're an adult. Order some food and stop making us feel bad," and hung up. I tried calling my mom next, thinking maybe she would at least pretend to care, but it went straight to voicemail. My dad did the same. The group chat called Nora Recovery Squad still sat there with my last message about needing help, and absolutely no replies, just our smiling profile pictures lined up at the top like some cruel joke. I ended up calling my Aunt Rachel, the one person outside the four of us who usually played referee when things got tense. She answered on the second ring, cheerful, asking if I was excited to be done with surgery. When I told her I was already home and alone, that everyone had gone to Mount Hood without even telling me, she went quiet in a way that did not feel comforting, just awkward. I sent her a picture of my leg in its brace, and another of my mostly empty fridge, and after a minute she replied with a little heart and a message that said, "I'm sure they just needed a break, sweetie. Try to be understanding, okay? You're strong. You can handle this." That was it. No offer to come by. No can I bring you anything. Just a reminder to keep playing the strong one. Later that afternoon, when the pain was bad again and I tried to get up for the bathroom, my crutch slipped on a loose edge of the rug. I went down hard on my hands and knees, sending this sharp bolt of pain up through my hip that made my vision blur. For a good 30 seconds, I just lay there on the floor, breathing like I had run a marathon, realizing if anything worse happened right then, nobody was coming. My phone was on the couch, buzzing every few minutes with new videos from Tessa's story, clips of my mom laughing in a ski lift, my dad holding up a paper cup of hot chocolate like a toast. When I finally crawled back, I saw he had posted his own picture too, all of them in front of the lodge with the caption, "Much needed family reset, #blessed, #winter getaway." I stared at the word family until it almost stopped looking like a real word. In that moment, something inside me shifted from hurt to clarity. If I kept pretending this was just a misunderstanding, I was going to drown. So I opened the Notes app on my phone and started writing everything down: the dates, the promises, the screenshots, the unanswered calls. I did not know exactly what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done pretending that being the strong one meant letting them walk all over me. A week after that fall on the rug, the purple and yellow bruises on my knees had started to fade, but the ache in my hip had settled into this low, steady throb that made every movement a negotiation. Nights were the worst. The pain would wake me up around 3 in the morning, and the apartment would be so quiet that I could hear the hum of the fridge and the traffic far below my windows. That was when my brain liked to rewind everything and hit replay. I kept seeing that photo of my family at Mount Hood, skis propped up, my mom's arm around my sister, my dad grinning like some ad for wholesome winter memories, and it made my chest tighten in a way the pain meds could not touch. At first, I just wrote about it to stay sane. I had a note on my phone titled, "Things I Don't Want to Forget," and I filled it with small, stupid details. The timestamp on the selfie my sister took at the hospital versus the timestamp on the first ski trip photo. The exact wording of the voicemail my mom left me before surgery about not worrying. The way my dad's caption on his post said "family reset" like I had never existed. But the more I wrote, the more my notes stopped being about this one betrayal and started reaching back further, into years of little moments I had brushed off because that was easier. I remembered the first time my parents floated the idea of buying a cabin near Mount Hood. It had been pitched to me as a dream we all shared, a cozy A-frame where we could spend holidays and get out of the city. I was the one who sat at their kitchen table with a laptop and a spreadsheet, running numbers on mortgages and property taxes while my mom talked about string lights and my sister scrolled through Pinterest for decor ideas. When the loan officer said my parents' income and credit would not quite cut it, everyone looked at me. "You're so good with money," my mom said, almost proud, like it was a character flaw she could finally use. "If we put you on the application, it will go through." I remember hesitating, but only for a minute. I told myself this was what adults did. We invested, we built something together, we trusted each other. The cabin became another project I managed behind the scenes. I set up the autopay for the mortgage, arranged the insurance, put the internet and utilities on my card because, as my dad reminded me whenever it came up, I understood all that tech stuff better than he did. They would send me money when they remembered, and I would patch over whatever was missing, telling myself it would even out. It never really did. The same thing had happened with my sister's business. When she decided to turn her home decor hobby into a full online shop, I was the one who stayed up late building her a basic inventory system, connecting her payment processor, and organizing a year's worth of crumpled receipts into something the IRS would accept. She called me her secret weapon, her genius, her back office, and I laughed and let it feel like a compliment instead of a warning. Lying on my couch after surgery, leg elevated, phone warm in my hand, those memories stopped feeling charming and started feeling like data points in a pattern I had not wanted to see. I opened my email and searched for every document with the cabin's address in it. They were all there, neat and undeniable. My name on the deed as a co-owner, my signature on the loan, my email as the main contact. I pulled up the banking app for the joint account I had with my parents, the one that was supposed to be temporary, just until they got out from under a rough patch, and scrolled through months of withdrawals labeled mortgage, insurance, internet, repairs. More than I had let myself notice. Then I checked the accounts that were only mine and saw how often I had quietly moved money around to cover overdrafts in that joint account before a payment bounced and hit my credit score. My hands started to shake, not from pain this time, but from the realization that while my family treated me like an optional extra, someone they could leave behind for a long weekend, their entire lifestyle leaned on me like a crutch. Without my name, my income, my ability to organize and pay on time, the cabin would not have existed in the first place. Their family reset spot had my fingerprints all over it. Once I saw it, I could not unsee it. I thought about the night, a couple of years ago, when my parents called me panicked because the electric company was threatening shutoff. I had dropped everything, driven over, and spent hours on the phone arranging a payment plan, then covered the first payment on my own card because my mom was in tears and my dad was furious with himself. Nobody forced me. I had wanted to help. But they never acted like they owed me anything for that. It was just absorbed into the story of Nora, the responsible one, Nora, the fixer. That story had been flattering when I was younger. Now it felt like a trap. The anger that came with that realization could have easily turned into some dramatic revenge fantasy. Me marching into their house, screaming about betrayals, throwing around words like disown and ungrateful. But screaming had never been my style, and if I was honest, I did not want to blow up my life. I wanted to stop being the unpaid safety net holding up theirs. So I did the most Nora thing possible. I opened my laptop, propped myself up a little higher on the pillows, and started researching attorneys. I skipped the ones with flashy ads and smiling faces on billboards and looked for someone who dealt with boring things like property disputes and joint accounts. I found a small firm with a bland website and a bunch of good reviews that mention words like straightforward and practical, and that sounded like exactly what I needed. My email to them was the first time I truly laid out the situation without minimizing it. I introduced myself, explained I was recovering from hip surgery, that my immediate family had left town for a ski trip without arranging any care, that I was on several joint accounts and owned a share of a vacation property where I no longer felt safe or welcome. I attached the deed, the loan documents, screenshots of the autopays in my name, and I wrote, I want to know what my options are to remove myself from any shared financial responsibility while taking only what is legally mine. Hitting send felt strangely more intimate than any of the desperate texts I had sent to my family in those first days. I was finally asking a question I knew they would never answer honestly. Am I allowed to stop carrying this? While I waited for a reply, life around the edges of all this mess quietly kept going. Mr. Lopez, my downstairs neighbor, knocked on my door every evening like clockwork to bring up my mail and see if I needed anything from the corner store. One night he showed up with a big container of homemade stew and a shy explanation that his mother had always cooked for the block when someone was sick, so he was just doing what she taught him. My team lead from work sent a grocery delivery after I admitted I had messed up an order because I could not get to the door fast enough. She filled it with easy stuff, microwavable meals, cut fruit, nothing that required bending or lifting. The group chat with my hiking and board game friends stayed active, full of memes and check-ins and stupid jokes about me leveling up in real life with my new metal hip. And they kept reminding me that when I was up for it, they would figure out stairs and rides and whatever else I needed. None of those people had any obligation to me. They did not share my DNA. They did not benefit from my credit score. That contrast made my family's silence feel even louder. A couple of days later, the attorney wrote back. His email was calm, almost dry, and exactly what I hoped for. He thanked me for the documentation, confirmed that as a co-owner, I had the right to ask for my share of the cabin's value, either through a buyout at fair market price or by sale and division of the proceeds. He stated clearly that I could remove my name and card information from any joint accounts and autopays going forward, that I did not have to keep backing debts I did not control. He did not call it revenge. He called it restructuring my financial boundaries. We can start with a consultation and a few letters, he wrote. But the direction is up to you. You don't need anyone's permission to protect yourself. I read that last sentence 3 times, then a fourth, letting it sink in. My whole life, it felt like my job was to protect everyone else, to make sure nothing collapsed on their watch. Sitting there with my laptop in my lap and my hip throbbing just enough to remind me of why I was doing this, I realized maybe it was okay if something finally collapsed on theirs. I was not plotting to destroy them. I was simply stepping out from under a weight they had pretended was ours when it had really been mine all along. For the first time since the surgery, I felt something that was not pain or anger. It was a thin, steady line of resolve. They had chosen a ski trip over me. I was about to choose myself over their comfort, and I had a feeling they would not see it coming until it was already done. 2 weeks after I sent that first email, I was moving better on my crutches, and the fog from the painkillers had thinned just enough for me to sign my name without shaking. The attorney and I had a short video call where he walked me through everything in a calm, almost boring voice that made the whole thing feel less like revenge and more like accounting. And that actually suited me. First, we drafted letters to the bank where I shared an account with my parents, the one that had slowly turned into a catch-all for cabin expenses and emergencies. The letter said I would be closing my connection to it, that I no longer consented to any automatic drafts using my name or credit, and that any debts going forward would belong to them alone. Then we prepared a notice to the company that handled the cabin's mortgage and another to the insurance provider, letting them know I intended to withdraw my name from the loans and policies and asking for the formal process to either be bought out at fair market value or to trigger a sale if my co-owners could not or would not cover my share. Seeing my family's financial life laid out in legal language made me realize just how deeply I had been woven into it. It was like someone had finally turned on the lights in a room I had been walking through in the dark for years. At the attorney's suggestion, I also went into every autopay portal I could remember setting up: cabin internet, cabin utilities, even a couple of bills tied to my parents' house that I had added my card to just for a month years ago. I removed my card information, canceled payments going forward, and printed confirmation pages, sending copies to the attorney in case anyone tried to say they did not know. Each click felt oddly similar to paying those bills in the first place, except this time, instead of draining my account, I was reclaiming it. They came back from Mount Hood about halfway through this process. I knew because my mother, Diane, finally called me, not to ask how I was, but to ask why the electric company had sent them a warning about a missed payment. I answered on the second ring and listened as she launched straight into, "I thought you were handling that. It bounced. What is going on?" I waited until she ran out of steam and then said, calmly, "I was handling it. I am not anymore. You own the house. You run the coffee shop. You can set up your own autopay." There was a beat of stunned silence, and then she said my name like a warning. "Nora, you are being unreasonable. We are family." I told her family does not leave someone fresh out of surgery alone and drive to the mountains. If you can do that, you can figure out how to log into a utility account. She started to say she had needed a break, that things had been hard at the shop, that Tessa had already booked the Airbnb, and the more she talked, the more obvious it became that she was still centering herself in a story where I was a side character, making things inconvenient. I ended the call before she could build up to a full guilt trip and texted her the customer service number for the electric company. The next day, my dad showed up at my apartment unannounced. I heard his knock, and for a second my body reacted the way it always had when he came by, a little rush of hope that maybe he was here to fix something. I opened the door slowly, leaning on my crutch, and he stepped inside like he owned the place, looking around at the stack of legal paperwork on my coffee table and the crumpled delivery bags in the trash. He did not ask how my hip was. Instead, he held up a letter from the mortgage company, the one my attorney had helped draft. "What is this?" he demanded, waving the paper. "You are trying to force us to sell the cabin." I told him the same thing I had told the lawyer, that he and Mom and Tessa could buy out my share at fair market value if they wanted to keep it, or we could agree to sell and split the proceeds. "I am not trying to take anything that is not mine," I said. "I am just done paying for something I cannot even use without being an afterthought." He said, almost incredulous, "You would really do this over one trip, one mistake." I looked at him and said, "This is not about one trip. This is about a pattern that has been going on for years, and this was just the first time it almost broke me physically. If I had fallen worse, if I had hit my head, you would have been too busy skiing to even know where they found me." He did not like hearing that. He called me dramatic too, said I was hurting my mother, upsetting my sister, that I had always been the reasonable one, and he did not understand why I was acting out now. I answered, "Maybe the reasonable one is just done being used." I walked him to the door, literally, crutch and all, and when he tried to step back inside to continue the argument, I blocked the doorway with my body. For once, I made the conversation end on my terms. Over the next week, little things started happening that I knew were connected to the changes I was making. Tessa texted me in a rush one morning, demanding the login information for a shared spreadsheet I had built for her business orders and expenses, the same one that used to live entirely on my laptop. I told her I had exported everything and that she should set up her own system going forward. She replied with a string of messages about how I was sabotaging her shop, how she had promo deadlines and brand deals and could not afford to look unprofessional. And I wrote back, "I am not sabotaging anything. I am just no longer doing free bookkeeping for someone who cannot return a phone call when I am recovering from surgery." After that, she tried a different angle, offering to pay me a little something to help her just one more time. I said no. Each refusal felt like a small rebellion against the version of me they counted on, the one who never said no, the one who always stepped in before consequences could catch up with them. Bills that used to quietly disappear because I covered them started arriving in their mailbox with big red notices. Late fees hit accounts I was no longer connected to. My attorney emailed to say the process for dealing with the cabin had officially started, that the mortgage company needed a decision. For the first time in a long time, the pressure was not sitting squarely on my shoulders. It was on theirs, where it honestly should have been all along. And underneath the anxiety and the unfamiliar silence from my family, there was a strange, steady feeling growing in my chest. It was not revenge in the movie sense. No dramatic reveal, no gasps. It was more like finally stepping out from under a load you did not realize you had been carrying your entire adult life, and knowing if someone else dropped it now, it would not crush you anymore. A few weeks after my dad stood in my doorway waving that mortgage letter around, the fallout finally caught up with them, and that was when the 63 notifications started piling up on my phone like a digital avalanche. It happened on a Tuesday morning while I was sitting on my couch after physical therapy, scrolling through an exercise app and feeling proud I could lift my leg a few inches without wanting to scream. My phone buzzed once, then again, until it would not stop. Missed calls from Mom, from Dad, from Tessa, voicemail alerts, texts pouring into the family group chat that had been dead silent when I needed a glass of water. They all had the same desperate rhythm. Nora, pick up. We need to talk. This has gone too far. Please answer. I tapped the thread open and saw paragraph after paragraph. My mom was asking why the cabin mortgage company was suddenly talking about a forced sale, insisting that she and my dad could not qualify to refinance without my income on the application. She wrote, "You are going to make us lose our place, the only thing that actually brings this family joy." My dad sent a blurry photo of a past due notice with a red stamp and asked if there was some kind of mistake with the autopay, like maybe I had accidentally turned it off. Tessa, of course, came in hot. She accused me of trying to ruin her life, typed in all caps about how losing the cabin would mean losing essential content for her brand, how a recent email from the IRS about reviewing her returns had spooked one of her sponsors and made them pause a deal. She wrote, "I trusted you with my numbers, and now you abandon me, like I had been the one who ghosted her while she lay in a hospital bed." I read every message carefully, partly out of habit, partly out of morbid curiosity. They were full of fear and anger and blame, but not one of them said, "We are sorry we left you alone after surgery." Not one of them acknowledged the picture of the empty fridge or the unanswered calls. It was like we were living in two different stories, and they had decided the only one that mattered was the one where I suddenly turned into the villain. While they were firing off text grenades, the more official consequences were rolling in on their side. My attorney forwarded me updates from the mortgage company. My parents and Tessa had been given options: buy out my share or agree to sell. Their late payments and their weaker credit without my score propping everything up made the first option almost impossible. They stalled, they argued, they tried to negotiate, but numbers do not care about feelings. In the end, the only realistic path was putting the cabin on the market. The thought of that place actually selling, of the A-frame in the snow with its string lights and cute mugs disappearing from their feed, made a part of me sad, because I had once been excited about it too. Mostly, though, it felt fair. If they wanted to treat the cabin like a symbol of their perfect family life, then they could let that symbol go the same way they let me go, by turning their backs when it mattered. Around the same time, Tessa texted me a screenshot of a letter from the IRS, a notice that they were reviewing her past returns and needed additional documentation. She sent it with the message, "Are you happy now?" and a crying emoji. I reminded her I had not filed anything for her that year, that I had told her weeks before surgery she would need to hire a real accountant if she wanted to expand her business. I did not tell her what I was thinking, which was that years of shoving receipts into bags and asking her genius sister to fix it at the last minute had finally met a wall that did not budge. My mom's messages got more erratic as the days went by. She bounced between accusing me of betrayal and begging me to just come over and talk it out like we always do. Which was funny, because what we had always done was me smoothing things over so no one ever had to change. She wrote about the coffee shop's slow winter sales, about how the stress was making her chest tight, about how my dad was snapping at her more. My dad sent one long text about how he had to borrow money from a friend to fix his truck, and how humiliating that felt. Tessa complained about losing a brand deal and having to tell her followers she was restructuring her business. Through all of it, the words "I am sorry" never appeared. My Aunt Rachel chimed in too, leaving me voicemails where she said things like, "Families go through rough patches, honey. You cannot burn it all down over one bad choice. And you know your mother loves you. She just does not always show it the right way." She sounded more panicked about the cabin than about anything that had happened to me physically. I wanted to ask her if she had looked at the photos I sent from that first week, of my legs strapped into a brace and my empty counters, but I knew it would not matter. People who have decided you are too strong to need help will twist themselves into knots before admitting they were wrong. While my family group chat turned into a wall of pleas and accusations, my real life outside of that thread got strangely quieter and more peaceful. Mr. Lopez knocked on my door one Saturday with a grocery bag and an invitation to come downstairs for dinner if I felt up to it. He and his partner served enchiladas and made sure there was a chair with extra cushions for my hip. My coworkers sent me a silly get well soon video and a care package with tea and a weighted blanket. My board game friends shifted our weekly meetups online until I could move better, then insisted on picking me up for the first in-person night so I did not have to navigate the bus. None of them owed me those things. None of them shared my last name. And yet, they were the ones checking in on my pain levels and my progress, not whether I had reconsidered saving a cabin or repairing my parents' credit. One evening, after a particularly intense flood of messages from the family chat about how I was destroying everything, I muted the thread and set my phone face down. I sat at my window and watched the rain slide down the glass, feeling an odd mix of grief and relief. Losing the cabin and the illusion of being the good daughter hurt, but the weight that had been sitting on my chest for years was finally starting to lift. They had taught me I did not matter as much as their trips, their comfort, their image. Now they were discovering what their lives looked like without the person who quietly made the math work. I did not need to say anything dramatic or deliver some big speech. The numbers were talking for me, and for once, I was willing to let the silence between us grow. By the time spring settled over Portland and the rain finally eased into softer showers, I could walk down the sidewalk without a limp, just a faint ache in my hip when I moved too fast. The cabin had a pending offer. My attorney had confirmed my share would be wired into my own account, and my parents were still treating it like a funeral. In the family group chat, my mom dropped long messages about memories by the fireplace and how sad she was to lose our special place, like it had been stolen by a stranger instead of sold because of their own choices. Tessa ranted about how she would have to find new content locations, adding that I was ruining her aesthetic, which I guess was the closest she could get to admitting something in her life was actually my decision and not hers. The thing is, while they were consumed with that loss, I was quietly building something else. I moved out of the third-floor walk-up that had become a symbol of everything I suffered through alone and into a smaller apartment with an elevator, wide hallways, and windows that let in real light. I picked the place myself, signed the lease myself, paid the deposit with my own money and what used to be my family rescue fund. For the first time, I did not need to check if a surprise bill or one of my sister's emergencies would wipe me out. I set up my own bank accounts and autopays where the only name on the paperwork was mine. Seeing that clean list, no shared utilities, no mystery charges for a cabin I barely used, felt almost as good as walking without crutches. I started therapy around the same time. My therapist listened as I laid out the events like they were bullet points in a report. The surgery, the ski trip, the empty fridge, the cabin, the credit. All the years of being the reasonable one. She nodded and started using words I had never applied to my own life: roles, enmeshment, golden child, scapegoat. She explained how some families unconsciously assign jobs to their kids: the one who succeeds, the one who keeps the peace, the one who absorbs the blame, and how sometimes the only way to break that pattern is to disappoint everyone at once and survive it. She told me that holding a boundary is not cruelty, even if other people feel hurt by it. It is just telling the truth about what you can and cannot carry anymore. That idea stayed with me long after our sessions ended each week. My parents and Tessa still texted now and then. My mom's messages softened from rage to guilt, tinged nostalgia. Remember when we used to bake cookies at the cabin? Your dad misses you? Your sister is under so much pressure. My dad sent shorter notes, more practical. Hope your hip is doing better. The truck is fixed. Things are stressful. Tessa mostly stayed silent or sent the occasional passive-aggressive update about how busy she was reorganizing her business. Not one of them wrote, "I am sorry we left you alone after surgery." Maybe they could not afford to look at that part of the story yet. I answered when I felt like it and let the rest sit. I stopped explaining myself. I put my energy into the people who had shown up when I had nothing to offer but bad hospital jokes and a need for rides. I went to dinner at Mr. Lopez's place twice a month, played board games with my friends on weekends, and slowly got back to hiking shorter, flatter trails. One afternoon, standing on a bluff outside the city, looking down at the river, I realized how different this felt from all the trips to the cabin. No one was taking pictures to prove they were having a good time. No one was waiting for me to pick up the bill or fix the reservations. We were just there, breathing, laughing, existing. That was what family started to mean to me. Not blood, not matching last names, but mutual care and the simple confidence that if I fell, someone would at least try to catch me. Sometimes I still think about those 63 messages lighting up my phone that day. My mom and dad and sister all begging me to talk. Not because they were worried about me, but because they were scared of losing their safety net. There is a version of that story where I called them back, rushed in to patch the holes, pretended the ski trip was just a misunderstanding, and let the cabin and the bills and the resentment keep piling up. That version of me is gone. I look at the faint scar on my hip, and I see a line, not just on my body, but in my life. On one side is the person who believed that being a good daughter meant never letting anyone face consequences. On the other side is the woman who understands that loving yourself sometimes looks like letting people be uncomfortable with what they did and not rescuing them from it. Family, to me now, means the people who would not leave you in a walk-up after surgery, even for perfect snow. Have you ever had to draw a line with someone you love and then hold it, even when they called you selfish for it? And did it end up saving you more than it hurt them?